Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Kelly Moore with MSU Extension in Missoula County, and we have 3 recipes today that I'm excited to show you. These recipes would be something you could pick up in your own grocery store, already made, but we are going to make them today from scratch. So you'll find out how easy it is. They taste a lot better, and probably a little less expensive as well. So looking forward to showing you these recipes today. Also, a Happy New Year. 2021 took a long time to get here. We're very happy it did. So I'm happy to be back at the beautiful library. So if you're like me, this time of year too, you want something quick and delicious and healthy to kind of get you through. So that's what all these recipes, I think you'll really enjoy making them. You need very little equipment. I'm going to use the food processor again today because it's really helpful making our falafel. That's the most important thing. And also we're going to make some hummus. We're going to focus on garbanzo beans today for 2 of our recipes. So those are very healthy beans. They're not typically the most popular beans when you're talking about the bean family, but you can make them into so many great things. So the first recipe we're going to start with is falafel. And I started with some dried chickpeas. That's also another name for garbanzo beans. And you can buy these in bulk at several stores around Missoula. They're very small. They look like the size of a peanut. When they're dried up, they're very lightweight. The nice thing about these, you can rehydrate them, and that's what we did with this recipe. So one that started out being so small, this size, after it's been soaked in water for about 24 hours, turns out to be this size. Whoops. So you can tell the difference there. And this is what you're typically more familiar with out of the can. So it was very easy to do. For falafel, you don't have to cook the garbanzo beans at all, which is kind of a different thought, isn't it? So it's that soaking, they gather in all that moisture. This recipe really it calls for not using the canned garbanzo beans because there's too much moisture in here. So you want it to be very dry. So after soaking these for about 24 hours, I did put a little bit of baking soda in there, and you'll see that in the recipe when you get that. Just covered it with 3 inches of water because they expand so much that you need that additional water for them to grow. And so once they're full size like that, then you can start making the recipe. So we're going to use our food processor here. I also have a lot of information on garbanzo beans, which are called a legume, or pulse. That also includes lentils, dried peas, any of those. So if you're interested in any of these materials, you can get a hold of me at the Extension office, and I'll make sure you get a copy. So it lists all the nutritional benefits of eating garbanzo beans and the others as well. So I'm going to take about, I started out with 2 cups of dry garbanzo beans, but you end up with like 4 cups worth because they've expanded that much. So I've split the recipe because we wanted to have some made up ahead of time so you get to see what it looks like cooked. I'm going to use about 2 cups to put back in the food processor. Also in the recipe, the nice thing about Middle Eastern food, you have a lot of different spices to add to it. And they're very flavorful spices. It kind of is a nice thing to do to get out of your comfort zone. We're so used to using, chili powder or cinnamon, that sort of thing, just regular spices. But if you start getting into cardamom, turmeric, let's see, what else we have? Coriander, all those. It's really exciting to see what those things will do together. And there's some real nutritional benefits too with turmeric. This is optional to put in the recipe, but I'm going to do that. It adds a little bit of color, and turmeric's a great antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, so it's a healthy thing to eat. Okay, so we're going to use about 2 cups of the garbanzos. I'll just spoon those in. And there we go. All right, and we're gonna pulse those up a little bit. They're already soft, even though they haven't been cooked, but they are soft and they'll blend right up. I use the pulse on the food processor a lot because pulsing lets you control the texture. And if I just put it on the on button, it could turn into a paste very easily. And we don't want to do that. So it takes about 15 pulses or so. And then you can see all that moisture coming out, so they grind that very easily. Okay, at this point, I'm going to add some of the other ingredients in our recipe. I have about 1/4 cup of onion. I've chopped that up. I chopped that up ahead of time because not everything always gets pulsed to the same size, so you might end up with some chunks later. So I like to kind of pre-cut that a little bit. I do have some garlic. I'm going to smash this garlic so it will chop easily. I'll go back here with my knife. There we go. Of course, we just want to get the skin off that garlic, but we don't have to chop this because it will chop easily in the processor. Right. You can also roast this garlic before you put it in there, so that would add a little different flavor as well. I have 3 cloves, or 2.5, I guess, since we have the recipe. Okay. Calls for just a pinch of cardamom, which that's about a pinch in there. I haven't bought cardamom in quite a while. When I went to get some, it's like $15 an ounce, which, I mean, it doesn't weigh a whole lot, but that's pretty pricey. And there are some places that don't have it anymore at all, so I'm not sure what's happened to the cardamom market lately. Okay. Got a little bit of salt here. I just used pink Himalayan salt. I've already pre-measured all this, so I'm not just guessing. Okay, a little bit of turmeric, and turmeric's a beautiful color. Gonna add that nice yellow in there. Okay. Our cumin, which is typically used for a lot of Mexican food. It's got a really nice aroma. A little coriander. Even with the mask on, I can smell these already, so they smell pretty great. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, a little black pepper. This recipe, too, gives you the option of using chickpea flour or regular flour. So if you use the chickpea flour, that makes this recipe gluten-free. So for those of you who are following that. And it's a very lightweight flour, so you can buy that in bulk. Okay. And also, once we are going to the frying part of this recipe, if it's not holding together as well as you'd like, you can add a little bit more of the chickpea flour to make that happen. The last thing we're going to add is a little bit of baking powder because it makes it a little fluffier when you're cooking it. Okay. All right, so basically that's all we add to this. Then we're just going to mix it up again. Or a little parsley. I think that's the one thing we have left. So you can already tell from that it's blending together pretty well. I'm going to get a little parsley, which I put over here. This is also a pretty inexpensive way to add some flavor to your dishes, plus it brightens them up, a nice flavor. I like to buy them fresh if you can. Dried's okay if you can't find fresh, but we have a little dill, 2 kinds of parsley. We have a flat leaf, usually it's called Italian parsley, which is right there. It's getting a little puny. I have that, and then just the parsley that you typically find on your plate in a restaurant. Okay? And some cilantro we're going to use in another recipe. So I'm just going to break off a little of the flat leaf Italian parsley. It's a little bit more flavorful than the curly parsley. There we go. A little bit of a mess there. Okay, we're just going to throw that in. We can throw a little bit of stems in there as well because that adds flavor. And the recipe, I'd like to add a little bit of dill. That was optional, but I think it adds a nice brightness to it. Okay. Here we go. Well, now I can really smell it. Then you want to just keep pushing it back down so everything gets mixed consistently here. Looks a lot like kind of cornmeal there since we added the turmeric. Okay. Now, that looks like that's the consistency that we need. So I'll just kind of show you how that should look. There we go, right there. So at this point, what we want to do is refrigerate it for a couple of hours. That way it holds together better. So I did have some made ahead of time, and that's what we're going to use to cook right now. Okay. So we'll go over here to where we need to do our cooking. I brought a skillet, a heavy-duty skillet, because it retains the heat better. And we're going to use some grapeseed oil because that was recommended in the recipe. And of course, oil, you want to get an oil that has a high heat tolerance, so you won't have any smoking. So that's why olive oil wouldn't be the best oil to use for this recipe. So we're going to fill it up to about 1/4 of an inch of oil in the bottom. Okay. There we go. All right. That's going to be it. So we're just going to be heating that oil up. All right. So you want to kind of start medium heat to start with so it won't get to high temperature too quickly. This recipe, too, called for something called fava beans. So I don't know if you're familiar with those. You don't find them too much around here, although our plant specialist at our office says you can grow fava beans. They just have to have a little bit earlier start, if you know, a little bit longer growing season. I was able to find a can of fava beans, so you could use that instead of the garbanzo beans if you wanted. So you can try that at another time and see how that goes. Okay. So we're going to set this aside here because we're going to need this processor again. And I'm going to put this in a bowl so we can get that into the refrigerator. Let's see where I put my spatula. It's the thing, you have such a big counter, it's easy to lose things here. I'm going to scrape that out. Also, if you wanted it to be a little spicier, you could certainly add a little, I think we've added maybe a little cayenne pepper in the first recipe I did, just to make sure that it gets blended well together. Okay, there we go. I'm going to rinse this out quickly because we're going to need to make our hummus next. Always on the cooking shows, they have a new processor sitting out for you. There we go. Okay, let me dry that out just a little bit. So we're still waiting for our oil to heat, and you might wonder, how do you know when it's ready? I kind of do the old school way. Sometimes I just put a little drop of water in there, see if it sizzles. Then you're getting pretty close. But you can use a thermometer too, if you want to be a little more accurate. Okay. There we go. Always wondered what we did before food processors. They're very handy to have. And actually, the price is coming down all the time, so I think they're a must-have in your kitchen. Okay, I'm going to take all these spices out of the way. We're done with those. So I wanted to show 2 ways to do garbanzo beans. Hummus is something we all tend to buy, and there are lots of different flavors. Lots of things you can add to hummus, but I just want to show you how easy it is to do your own. So we'll start up with that recipe next. Hummus has something called tahini in it, and tahini is made out of sesame seed, so it's kind of a almost like the consistency of peanut butter, but the oil is always at the top, so you have to kind of mix it together a little bit before you use it. So, let's see. I'm going to open up our cans of chickpeas here. Chickpeas or garbanzos, both the same, so however you want to refer to them. Usually pretty inexpensive as well, so I always have some of these in my cabinet. Come in very handy. Great in salads. Great in some curry dishes. I add those to them as well. Good source of protein. There we go. Okay, these tend to have a lot of, well, they have a lot of liquid in them anyway because they're in the can, but a lot of moisture in there anyway. So we're going to kind of drain these a little bit. You could save the liquid. I guess it's good to put in soups and a lot of different things. So I hate to dump that out, but there we go. Something to think about in the future. All right. You can make hummus out of a lot of different things. I made beet hummus recently, which I liked really well. It was a beautiful color. So if you have somebody who doesn't like beets, that's a good way to get them talked into it. Okay, so we're going to put both the cans of chickpeas in there. There we go. And then we'll recycle these later. So I'll put those over here. Now before I get onto that, this is the thing about multitasking. I'm going to see how our oil is here. See if we're getting closer. Nope, can't hear that sizzling yet, so we're not quite there. Turn that just a little bit more. And this cast iron, you want to be really careful. You just don't grab the handle because the whole pan heats up and it gets very hot. Very hard to handle. Okay, so we'll wait a couple more minutes before we start forming the patties here for falafel. Not too much longer. Okay, so let's pulse our chickpeas over here. And these have been cooked before they were put in the pan. So see, they're much more, a little more smushy. Okay. Okay, and this, of course, calls for tahini. This recipe calls for an entire jar, which we were just talking about earlier. I think that's a little too much tahini, so I'd rather add just a little bit to start, and then add more, so you can taste it to see if it needs a little bit more. So this is also for lemons. Lemons are called in this recipe. Again, I like to use fresh lemons. Okay. And one of my favorite things, this nice juicer. I found too, I don't know why, sometimes the funniest shape of lemons tend to be the juicier ones, like the round lemons. So it's always a good luck for me when I can find one of those. Okay. And also the zest of the lemon too, you can save that for another recipe. Okay. I hear our oil popping, so I think I'm going to leave that for 1 second and then come over here and get this done. Because it can go from not hot enough to too hot in very little time. I'm going to use gloves to form our falafel. And you've probably eaten this in a couple of different shapes. You can make it into a ball, or you can make it into a patty. So whatever you would like to do. The typical way of eating falafel is to put it into like pita bread, a pocket, or this naan bread. So it's a little harder to put a big falafel ball in there. So I like to make mine a little flatter. If you're worried about the shape of your falafel, you can always use spoons to shape it out. Oh, these gloves are not the easiest things to get on. Okay. All right, so this has been chilly for 2 hours, so I made this a little earlier today. We're going to see if it'll hold together. And remember what we said earlier, if it doesn't hold together as well as you'd like, then that's when you want to use the chickpea flour. So we'll see how this works here. And you want to kind of squeeze it a little bit. Doesn't have to be, just perfect. Okay, so basically it's going to be kind of like this. I'm going to just ease it into the oil. Let's see where we go. I'm going to use this to kind of help me do that. All right. You want to get it brown on both sides, so we're going to let it cook for a couple of minutes. You could also add regular flour too if you wanted to make it stick together a little bit better. Or if you don't have luck with either one of those, you can put it back in the food processor, grind it up a little bit more. I just like to have it a little bit bigger texture there. Whoops, like that one. I had to hold on to it better. I didn't do that. So maybe a spoon would be best. So let's try that. So we'll use 2 spoons. So that way we can just pack it down each time. Just ease it into the oil. Yep, that's much better. Okay. Then I'm going to just adjust my heat and turn it up just a little bit more. Okay, let's try that again. There's also, I guess, like a falafel scoop. So if you make these a lot, you might want to look into getting one of those, which Amazon has a lot of those items. Okay, see if we can get it flipped over here. Yep, those look good. Okay. Do a couple more here. And then when you have them cooked on both sides, then we're just going to drain them here on a paper towel, getting the excess oil off. And then once I've done like one batch, I kind of like to maybe check my oil level and maybe add a little bit more if it looks like I was a little bit low. And it's okay if some of them kind of fell apart a little bit because you're going to put a bunch of good stuff on them anyway. Let's see. There we go. Room for 2 more. Okay. All right. So basically when you take them out, this is kind of the way they're going to look. They're a little bit smaller than maybe what you prefer to make them into, but you say you can get a whole lot more of them when they're on this size to fit into your bread. All right, we'll take those out. Okay. There. We won't forget about those. We'll give them a couple more minutes. We'll get back over here to our hummus. Just push this down a little bit. So it looks kind of smooth already, but you really want it to get a whole lot smoother. So let's So we're going to add the other stuff here. Okay, we need the juice of 1 lemon, so I have another side here to get. And that lemon was pretty good size, so. All right. Okay. And we're going to need a little bit of salt, which I think I put away already. All right. And this recipe calls for a little bit of ice water as well, so that just helps make it a little smoother. Okay. So there's really very few ingredients that we need for this. We need a little cumin again, which we have left over from earlier. So let's see, about a teaspoon. Just going to put that in there. All right. Okay, we want to get a spoon to add our tahini. So again, like all the oil that's at the top, we're going to kind of try to stir it a little bit so it'll kind of blend together. Although it's going to get mixed together in the food processor for sure. And I want to make sure I don't forget about this because we will be in big trouble if I do that. We don't want our smoke detectors to go off here, do we? Okay. One here, nice and brown. Okay, so even a few of the pieces that kind of fell apart, those are probably still going to be pretty tasty. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll just let those cool off a little bit. Boy, I made a mess over there at the stove. But cooking is messy, isn't it? Okay. Now, again, since it's called for a whole jar, but we're not going to add a whole jar. We're going to just kind of test it out and see where we're at. Yeah, it's not the nicest color, is it? But it really does taste good. Used in a lot of Middle Eastern cooking. Okay, that's about half of the jar there, so I'm going to see what it's like. Okay, a little bit of salt. Okay, and a little bit of lemon juice. We're going to try a little bit before we add the rest. Okay, just use the pulse again. So it's getting smoother all the time. So this recipe really doesn't call for any olive oil, as some recipes do. So I can still see a few chunks at the top, so you want to make sure everything's blended well. You want it to be as smooth as possible. And then to add a little bit of our ice water, which I'm going to grab a little ice I happen to have. And what we're going to do is, while this is running, we're just going to kind of add a little bit of water as we go. Oops. Okay, yeah, that really does make it nice and smooth. Right there. So that should be very tasty. So the only way we're going to find out is take a little bit of a taste. Let's see what we need to add. I think it needs a little bit more salt, a little touch of cumin. I think we're going to be good. Sorry, you have to take my word for it. But again, when you make it at home, you can experiment a little bit. Also, this one calls for garlic, so I chose not to put it in this one right now because we have so much of a garlic flavor in the falafel. So I was trying to get some different flavors, but you can certainly put it in there if you would like. It's a little bit more cumin. Need a little bit more lemon juice, and I think we're going to be all set. It's the nice thing about cooking. You just kind of experiment and see what else you need to add. Always start out with a little bit, and then you can add more if you need it. Okay. I think that's going to be great, so I'm going to get a bowl to put that in. All right. Also, what I wanted to put on the hummus, let me see if I can, where do I put that, is something called sumac. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a beautiful color. You might have heard of the sumac bush, but this is kind of in the same family, but not like what we have around here. So it's got a really bright citrus flavor to it. And yeah, I love it. It looks really nice on garnishing things too. So I picked it up at World Market. So they do have a lot of seasonings. And that's a good way to just try something out. Usually it's pretty inexpensive. If you like it, then you get a whole bunch. If you don't, then no big deal. So yeah, this is kind of the consistency. You want your hummus to be very, very smooth. Okay. And I know, again, it's probably not the most appetizing color, but we like it because we know what it tastes like. Okay. And then you see you can just sprinkle a little bit of sumac over the top. There, so yeah, I'd be curious to see if you really, what you think about that flavor. Say I use it on a lot of things. So there, just changes the color up a little bit. All right, so we'll have to taste that in a little while as well. So that did not take long. That's 2 cans of garbanzo beans that don't cost very much and an awful lot of hummus. And even with the hummus I have left, you could add something different to it. You know, it's just kind of up to you. Okay. So those are our first 2 recipes. Now we're going to do kind of a fresh salsa, and we're going to use a fresh pineapple for that. And this is very quick and easy to put together, and it's a great thing to eat with, you know, with chips or, with just any of your favorite kind of Mexican food. So let's first of all cut our pineapple. You could use canned pineapple for this, but again, I like to use the fresh. I think you have a little bit more nutritional value there. Plus, it tastes a lot better, I think. There we go. So I bought 1 fresh pineapple, and it's already starting to get a little dry on the top. I bought it a couple days ago, but it smells good. So anyway, so I'm going to start with cutting off the top. So you want to have a pretty sharp knife. And then already looking inside, it looks like it's going to be really juicy and good. Okay, I'm going to cut off the bottom part. All right, so that way it's kind of good to have it set up like that. And then from there, I'm just going to go around the sides and cut off all of these, the skin. Kind of try to get as much as I can to get out all the little pieces of the pineapple skin there that don't taste as good. And you can buy fresh pineapple cut already too if you wanted to do that. You don't want to go through all the cutting. Okay. So there's sometimes I like a little more brown spots, so I usually just try to trim those off a little bit. Okay, so of course the center of the pineapple, there's a core, which is a little tougher, but it's usually the sweetest part of the pineapple, so sometimes people just like to chew on those. But I'm going to cut it in half, and then I'm going to quarter it. So you can, when you're cutting it, you can tell just this core part of it's a little bit tougher to cut through. So for today, we're just going to kind of cut that part off. Save that for something else. Then I'm just going to kind of chop up the pineapple, kind of bite-sized pieces. Okay, I'm going to stick them in this bowl. And this is a pretty small-sized pineapple, so if you want to make it for a lot more people, you know, you get 2 of these or just get a larger pineapple too. And you can kind of tell by smelling them, or if on the bottom, well, this one started looking a little moldy looking there, so that means it was a good thing we cut it today, because it was getting to that point where it might not taste very good. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for this other side. That middle part. Really a juicy one, so that's good. Okay. And then finally that last piece here. All right. Okay, let me move this out of the way here. And I washed out my hands off a little bit here. All right. So in this recipe, we're going to use some chilies, and that's another way to really inexpensive way to spice up your food a little bit. I know sometimes people are a little bit afraid of chilies, but I just love them. There's so many different varieties and so many different elements of heat, and I just really encourage you to just try to find out more about chilies and see what you can do with them. And it's surprising how many of these we can grow around here as well. So this recipe calls for something called a Fresno chili, which I did find at one of our stores. It's a little bit smaller. I did taste it. I've pre-chopped some of it. And I was just saying earlier, I tasted it, I thought, wow, it really doesn't taste that spicy. I grew up in an area that we had a lot of spicy food. So I thought, maybe that's not going to be spicy enough. So I did get a jalapeno as well. And I went to put some eye drops in my eyes this morning and forgotten, and I hadn't really washed my hands as well as I thought. So they were very hot, very hot on the skin, maybe not so much to taste. So, of course, the part of the chili that's the hottest, and you always have to be careful of, is the, would be the seeds and the membrane. So I always try to clean those out carefully, and you can bet I'm not going to touch my face today without washing my hands. And if you're doing a lot of these, I'd suggest you wear gloves too. Usually when I make salsa, I definitely wear gloves, because even if it doesn't hurt in the beginning, it will hurt the next day. Your hands will be very sore. And they're always coming up with new varieties of chilies. There's a scorpion chili that is just unbelievably hot. I believe it's probably the hottest chili there is. Okay. So I'm just going to probably cut up just a couple of pieces of the jalapeno, because like I see, we already have the Fresno chili. So I'm going to chop it up pretty finely. Okay. And this recipe is really a pretty recipe too, because you have so many nice different colors in there. So I'm going to add the Fresno chili, which is one small one. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the jalapeno. And you'll have the sweetness and the heat as well, so that's a nice combination. Let me grab another spoon here. Okay. I'm going to kind of stir that up a little bit. Now this one we're going to use a little lime juice. So again, another inexpensive way to spice up your food, to use the citrus. It kind of takes away from the need for salt because it's replacing that. So it's a lot healthier if you're watching your salt in your diet. Look for the bigger limes that are a little juicier. Some of the smaller ones tend to dry up really fast. Not to say that they still don't have juice, but just not as good as the other. So I'm just going to, again, put some of that on. This time, too, I'm going to zest a little bit of the lime. That's where the oils are, so you get a lot of flavor in that. So another thing everybody should have is a zester. Whoops. Probably easier to zest a whole one than it is a half one, for sure. Okay. This is kind of one of those that you want it to set a little bit so it can get all the flavors together. Okay, whoops. I always pick out a bowl that's too small. We're also going to use another one of the greeneries over here. We're going to use some cilantro, which is one of my personal favorites. Use a lot of cilantro. And people have like a love-hate relationship. You either love it or you hate it. So I guess it actually does taste like soap to some people. Oh, I'm thankful it doesn't taste like that to me. So I'm just going to rough chop it a little bit. It's already been washed, so we're good with that. And also I'm going to chop the stems because that's where a lot of the flavor is, so I don't want to throw those away. So I'm going to put about 1/4 cup of cilantro in there. I can smell that too. That sounds great. And we're going to add a little bit of green onion. You could also use purple onion in there if you'd like. So I'm going to try to use even the green part and the white part. So another nice thing with recipes, once you try them the way they're written and you think, wow, I'd like to change something up, I'd say go ahead and do that. That's the way it becomes your own. Then I'm going to add a little bit more lime juice to it. Okay. You could also add a little bit of chili powder if you wanted. A little cumin to this too, but I think we're going to just leave ours the way it is. So that's kind of how it looks, the finished product there. All right. We're going to set this over here. So those are our 3 recipes for today. Our falafel, our hummus, and our fresh pineapple salsa. So I hope you enjoy those, and we'll have the recipes available for you. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.